This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. If you're interested in how your business or interest group can support Dispatches from Planet Albany, contact david.lombardo@wcny.org. And if you're interested in personally supporting the show, visit capitalpressroom.org/donate.
I've also declared war on potholes. So here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
If there's one thing that politicians can agree on, whether Republican or Democrat, it's that they love paying lip service to kids and families. But delivering on that support, whether you're the first mom governor or a backbencher in the legislature, can sometimes be another story. So while it should seem like lobbying on behalf of this valued constituency would be like shooting fish in a barrel, in reality, it's an uphill battle that leaves some of the most happy warriors at the end of their rope at the end of the legislative session. And it's with that backdrop that I wanted to talk with one of my favorite people in Planet Albany, Jen O'Connor, who, after most recently working at Education Trust New York and Prevent Child Abuse New York, is stepping out on her own to form her own eponymous consulting business focusing on, in her words, strengthening services for children and families in New York. Jen, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I love being referred to as a happy warrior.
Well, honestly, when I was thinking about that, I was thinking more about some other lobbyists in this space who I saw in June and were just like, I'm done with this place. I can't anymore with the flow of the bills in the legislature. And they were really just at their wits' end. And I actually think about you as this person who puts up this more steely facade. And I wonder whether that is an act and a facade of its own, and whether this session does take a toll for you.
Oh, I think it absolutely takes a toll. You know, you can kind of pride myself on being steely in public and then, you know, having a heart at home. But it is frustrating. It's frustrating when seemingly not a lot happens for months and months, and then there's this kind of rush to pass legislation at the end of session. And a lot of things are left undone.
Yeah, thinking about the idea of what's undone and done, there seem to be little victories here and there. So do you have to really buy into them as meaningful to keep your head above water?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to celebrate the little victories in order to stay sane. And especially when working with different constituencies or different coalition members, folks who aren't, you know, members of Planet Albany, if you will, you need to temper their expectations and make sure that they do celebrate those kind of quote unquote little wins. But yeah, that's frustrating too, right? Because you want X, you get Y, and you have to keep pushing for X while thanking everyone for Y.
Well, I want to come back to expectations in a bit, but let's start and talk a little bit about you and your CV. What different roles have you had here in Planet Albany? I mentioned Education Trust New York. I mentioned Prevent Child Abuse New York, but what predates some of that?
I started out in the 90s in both houses of the legislature. I worked in the Senate. I worked in the Assembly. And then I started down the nonprofit route in 2000. So it's been about 25 years in nonprofits at this point. Started out in nonprofits in New York and then went to the National Governors Association for close to 5 years in D.C. Came back here to work for the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy. And everyone works at the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy.
I had no idea.
Absolutely. I was there for 6 years. And then, and then have just stayed in that space, in that human services space.
Well, why did you leave the legislature? A lot of people do that to make money and to capitalize on everything they learned from that experience. You went to the nonprofits, so I can't imagine it was to earn money.
Yeah, it was not to earn money, but probably to keep my sanity, I think. I worked on campaigns for a little bit, and that's, I think that's something you do in your 20s when you're happy to sleep on a candidate's floor and eat donuts and smoke cigarettes. And
Any races we should know about?
absolutely none. No.
No?
There were not a lot of wins in my past.
And I'm making some assumptions based on the issues you lobby on, but I imagine you were working for Assembly Democrats?
I worked for Assembly Democrats. I worked for Senate Republicans.
Okay, so always in the majority.
Always in the majority.
Smart.
Absolutely.
And was there any big difference from one house to the other? Because I think outsiders might perceive a Republican-led chamber and a Democratic-led chamber as being demonstrably different, but I kind of think there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, I don't think that there was any difference at all, frankly. It was, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, both of my bosses went to serve time, so I have that to.
Who are you referring to there?
I'd rather not say
Just
who.
give us a little tease.
Just two upstanding middle-aged white men.
Well, thinking about the 90s, that would have been the people who would be in charge.
It was, yeah, and it's a different game now. It really is. Like, I am lucky to be in this space now, because in the 90s when I was working as staff in the legislature, it was a lot of kind of middle-aged white men who certainly didn't have any hands-on experience with the issues that I lobby on now. This legislature looks a lot different. It looks like New York. There are moms there, there are dads there who are involved, who have little kids. And so, there's definitely been a change in that demographic, which is really helpful, I think, for these issues.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that, because there is a lot of attention paid to groups like the Mom Squad, the fact that we have a mom governor, and I wonder how demonstrably different the policies produced with these new faces are from, say, the 90s, or even more recently with Governor Cuomo.
I do think that in the last couple of years, there's been a shift to, actual policy that focuses on children and families. Is that exactly what the advocacy community wants? Does it, when it comes down to the fine print, is it exactly what we want? Probably not. But I think there's certainly room for conversation with folks now that I don't think there was, back under the first Cuomo administration or the Pataki administration when I was working in the legislature.
But what about the idea that everything the legislature is willing to do is kind of within the status quo, so to speak? Because we have issues like child poverty, cutting it in half by 2032, or ensuring universal child care access, and things that really need ultimately billions of dollars of investment, and therefore shaking up the budget priorities. That hasn't happened under this governor. It seems like everything is more around the margins. Is that a fair way to say that they're thinking about things?
I think that's a fair assessment. I do. I think that we are afraid of maybe not the bold budget choices, but we're afraid of the hard work of system transformation. That's what it really takes. It's not just that investment of dollars. It's that work that has to happen across very siloed agencies to make it work for children and families. There was a huge investment at the end of last session in childcare subsidies to close a gap for New York City and the rest of the state.
Assuming New York City will put up its matching share.
Put up its match, and assuming that what we're hearing is that the way to get this money is so onerous that the counties maybe aren't going to do it. And so then what we come up against next session, I fear, is government saying to the advocates, you didn't use it, so you obviously didn't need it. And that's not true. It's absolutely necessary. But if you put up all these guardrails and hoops for people to jump through, then the money's obviously not going to go out the door. So we need to, I think, not just do these grand gestures, but actually have some meat on the bones and some willingness behind these grand gestures to make things work.
Well, before we talk about what politicians are willing to do and what they're not willing to do, I want to play a clip from an old episode of The Simpsons that I think really embodies this dynamic here.
Our demands are simple: a small cost of living increase and some better equipment and supplies for your children.
Oh, that's reasonable. Give it to him.
Yeah, in a dream world, we have a very tight budget. To do what she's asking, we'd have to raise taxes.
They're way too high as they are now.
It's your children's future.
Oh, the children, yes. I forgot, yes.
It'll cost you.
Yeah, taxes. Right.
So how representative is that of the battles that you're fighting on issues like child care, like addressing child poverty?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, we should play that more often because I think that's absolutely spot on. You know, we survey parents about, I was just looking at some numbers for parental supportive after-school programs, and it's in the 90 percentile. They're very happy with after-school programs. They keep kids safe and they help to educate them. Are we putting money into after-school programs? No, the feds just froze funding for 21st century community learning centers. So we say a lot of good things, and then we do the opposite sometimes. And again, I mean, part of going out on my own and starting this consultancy is being sick of the platitudes, right? And wanting to see real change and hoping to work with groups that want to push for what is absolutely necessary, and help to change the mindset of folks. Because people get in here, I think, to elected office, and they have a certain amount of time to bring things home to their district. They want to see change, very, very quickly. And we know that investing in a baby is going to take some time to see those outcomes. And if those outcomes are positive, they don't get as much play as the negative outcomes, right? So years ago, I sat in this building with a very lovely public servant who worked for the governor at the time. I think the governor may have been Spitzer. And they said to me, I can invest in the baby who doesn't have any problems at the moment and looks good on paper, or I can invest in the 15-year-old who is headed into the juvenile justice system. And I will say now what I said to that person then, it can't be a choice. You have to invest in both because this 15-year-old is going down the wrong path, yes. And you need that, that influx of money to change that path. But you can't ignore the baby because that baby is the 15-year-old 15 years from now. And somebody else, it may not be you in this chair in the governor's office, and it may not be the legislators who are in the legislature at the moment, but it's going to be somebody. And, I'm still here 30 years later. So that 15-year-old, that baby is 20 at this point.
Or maybe 30 if we're really being honest about how old people are.
Let's not be honest about how old people are. But yeah, I mean, I hope, fingers crossed, that baby grew up to be okay, but it's doubtful in a lot of cases.
Well, you brought up the federal government's support for some of these issues, and I'm definitely guilty of giving state policymakers here a hard time for their investments. But when we look at it compared to what Republicans in D.C. are looking to do, I think children and families in New York should give state policymakers probably a round of applause. So with that backdrop and thinking about the federal government and the big, beautiful bill, what challenges are you anticipating in 2026 here in Albany?
I think there are absolutely huge challenges coming down the pike. And I hope that there are some contingency plans because everything that happens at the federal, we get so much federal funding to fund things like childcare, after school, Medicaid and SNAP, obviously. Mm-hmm. And when those cuts come, and they are coming, and at the very least, they're going to do what they just did with after-school programs and freeze them as they review them. Those are going to impact programs, which are going to impact families, which are going to impact kids. And we need to be planning for that. And what that means for me in my current role with at least one of my clients is making sure that programs are aware that this stuff is happening at the federal level, connecting them to their local congressperson, but also to their local state rep to say to them, like, you need to be on this, you need to be aware of this, you need to be talking to whoever the congressional rep is in your district.
Hopefully it's a Republican.
Hopefully it's a
Otherwise,
Republican.
they don't have a lot to say.
Absolutely. But really making those connections and making those cases and having the data to show that to the Republican members. And I do think that we have, when I think about somebody like a Jake Ashby or a Josh Jensen, like we have Republican members who are solid on, have good ideas for supports for children and families. And I've enjoyed working with them. And I think that there are more members out there than we probably think on that side of the aisle. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we refuse to work across the aisle on, quote unquote, Democratic issues, because I do think that they are or should be nonpartisan issues.
But why do you need to appeal to Republicans here in Albany? Everybody knows that it doesn't matter if you've got a majority support. If the majority includes Republicans, you need to have Democrats on board for ideas here in Albany.
Agree, but I've been here long enough that this Democratic Senate is a relatively new thing. So I don't, first of all, I believe in working together, all of us, to the extent that you can for kids. And I'm ready I want to be ready for the day when one of the houses flips or...
That kid's going to be like 60-year-olds by that time.
And we still care about them.
Yeah. A different group cares for them now. The ARP cares for them.
Well, and maybe I'll go to work for them at that point.
Need help keeping track of the legislative session? Wish you had an extra set of eyes at the Capitol? New York State Watch does all of that and much more. Discover New York State premier legislative intelligence service by visiting nystatewatch.net or contacting Shane King at statewatch.com to learn more. Well, I want to talk about the idea of going out and setting up your own shop. Was this something that you would have always done? Is this something that is the product of, to be candid, having your position eliminated at Education Trust New York? How did you end up here in this space?
How did I end up in this space? Yeah, I've thought about this for a long time. And I thought about it 2 years ago in particular. But then I went to work for Ed Trust, and it was a fantastic job for 2 years. But they are restructuring and moving more into the K-college space as opposed to the early childhood space. And I decided it was just time. Why go look for another job when at the end of the day, I have a certain skill set that I hope people appreciate and will, want to pay for.
Yeah, what is the pitch you make to clients, and who do you envision being your clients, assuming they're listening right now?
I would love to curate a group of clients who, is obviously focused on children and families, whether that's maternal and child health, which I would like to get back to because I've done some early education work the last 15 years, which has been very satisfying, but I really love maternal and child health. I love early literacy. I want to connect the dots between all those different programs because we remain, as we are at the state level in terms of funding for services, we remain in the advocacy community very siloed. And so, you've got the group that focuses over here on early intervention. You've got the group over here that focuses on pre-K. We need to all be working together. And one of the things that I love and have been successful at doing is coalition building. And so I hope to, like I said, cultivate and curate clients who are in those spaces and then kind of bring all of those folks together.
Are there clients who don't already have a consultant or lobbyist that you are looking to target, or are you going to be like, hey, come on over here, the grass is a little greener, the water's a little warmer?
I'm not above that, but I will say...
You got to get paid. You got bills.
I've got a mortgage. I'm a single mom. I've been approached already, and am hoping to have more conversations with folks who have not either thought about or been able to bring somebody on board. I'm happy to do contract lobbying. That's what I'm doing with the Network for Youth Success at the moment. But I also really want to do coalition convening and meeting facilitation and all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I've had those conversations. There are groups out there, and maybe, maybe there's somebody out there who's not super happy with their lobbyist. I'm, happy to have that conversation too.
Well, you mentioned that idea of expectations. So how do you sell yourself as someone who can get stuff done while also being like, and it might take a couple years and a change in administration and a new White House and a whole new way of thinking about our responsibility to the most vulnerable in society. So if you've got 30 to 40 years, I would love to work for you. I mean, is that the pitch? How do you sell people with the expectations game?
I mean, look, I've got a monthly retainer. If you want to bring me on for a couple of years, that's up to you. No, this work is not for the faint of heart. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm known for my candidness, I don't suffer fools. Like, you're gonna get what you get. And I'm always going to be honest with you. And so I'm literally having conversations with people about, we're going to go for this. If this is, let's come up with an ask that isn't what I call a Christmas tree ask of just a bunch of different things. But let's prioritize. Let's come up with one thing that we want this year. And then let's do the work to have those conversations. And then let's ask for it. And but let's go in with realistic expectations too, that we don't know what's going to happen from day to day or from hour to hour at the federal level. And so if the rug gets pulled out from under us and we have to pivot, we're going to have to pivot. But this is not a sprint. If anyone thinks that they're going to just come in and ask for $7 million for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library and get it that first year, you're probably not going to. But the work continues. And again, like you said, you kind of have to be happy with what you got and then continue to build from there. So it's not, I would hate for maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot, but I don't think that anyone is going to come in and say, hey, we're going to give you X amount of money to get this, and you have to promise you're going to get this. I'm going to work my butt off to try and get it. And I'm 99% sure I can if nothing else happens to, throw us off course.
Well, what is the one thing that you think is going to be the focus of the 2026 legislative agenda or budget season as it pertains to kids and families? Because right now I'm skeptical it'll be universal child care, since the governor has already put that money aside for a study so she can point to that ongoing process. And I don't imagine there'll be any major investments into child poverty. So what do you think is going to be the dialogue in 2026? And will it be one that's actually focused on something that can get done?
I think we're going to still have those conversations and need to have those conversations about things like universal child care. But I do think that the conversation is probably going to shift to nutrition assistance programs and healthcare, because those are going to be the huge cuts at the federal level. So all reactionary stuff. I mean, I would like to think that there are people in this building right now who are thinking proactively about what they're going to do about that. They won't acknowledge it. The Hochul administration, whether it's Division of Budget or agency people, won't acknowledge contingency plans and instead just say, oh, we couldn't possibly backfill. Do you take them seriously that they don't have contingency plans, or is that just a line that you have to take in terms of negotiations? I don't know. I've heard that too. Seems like a dereliction of duty if you're not working on a backup plan. It gives me pause. Let's say that. Yeah. I mean, I hope that people are working on contingency plans, because we know what's going to happen. I mean, the feds have already said what's going to happen, right? It's in this bill. Believe people when they tell you what they're going to do. Believe people when they put out something like Project 2025. Like, read it and believe it. I hope that's happening. I do think that advocates, and I in this role have a responsibility to again remind folks that we can't take steps back on things like childcare or child poverty reduction because we're distracted by something else. But I do think we have the means to backfill to a certain extent, and I think we do need to look at revenue raisers at this point. And how does that become part of the conversation? Because the governor has clearly said it's not going to be her leading the charge. So is it the legislature that actually needs to be serious about this and not just put it out there as a bargaining issue? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if this business leaders task force, again, kind of using universal childcare as an example, if that group is serious and kind of goes out to talk to the public and has conversations about, how would we make this happen, they're supposed to be tasked with revenue raisers, whether that's raising taxes or something else.
Or just looking for gold at the end of the rainbow.
Or using money that comes into the state for things like whatever that is, the new gambling stuff. And
I think that's already been earmarked.
Has already been earmarked?
Yeah, I think everybody's got a little finger on that.
Well, that's the thing. Everybody wants that money, right? But some of the proceeds from sales of the legalization of marijuana were supposed to, in statute, go to after-school programs. I'm not sure that has happened. So again, I think revisiting kind of where this money is going to, it behooves us to do that. But I do think we're going to have to do something. And I don't think that letting people fall through the cracks and lose their health insurance is the way to go. And again, we can say, we want to do good things for kids, but if mom loses her SNAP benefits, that's a kid who, is hungry, and that's a kid who's not concentrating in school, and that's a kid who is not going to be reading proficiently by third grade. Like, we can draw that line, and we need to do a better job of that.
You mentioned the idea of coalition building, and one actor who's out there just excited to join any coalition is Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado. So would you tell a potential client or maybe existing clients steer clear of this guy or lean into his support? Because he's going to want to talk about family and children issues, and especially if it gives him a chance to differentiate himself from the governor, and maybe it makes the governor feel like she needs to be responsive to those issues so she doesn't get outflanked, so to speak.
I'm a big proponent, as I said, about talking to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think you talk to both parties. I think you talk to anybody who's up and coming. I think you talk to all candidates. I don't work for the government, so my responsibility is to my clients and to children and families writ large. And so I think you talk to the lieutenant governor, and I think you talk to, every New York City mayoral candidate there may be, and I think you have those conversations. Again, you never know who's going to be in power. And I think you focus to a certain extent on who's in power now, but you have to have a contingency plan. We all have to have a contingency plan.
So if people want to get in touch with Jen O'Connor Consulting, how do they do it?
You can email me at jen@joconnorconsulting.com. That's Jen with 2 N's. Or you can probably just call you, and you'll send them in
I have your number.
Direction. You have my number.
Yeah. And you brought a mug in for me. How many mugs did you make?
I didn't make any mugs. I just had a birthday, and my brother sent me a box of mugs. So thanks to him for that.
And have you thought at all about merch and whether that's going to be something you lean into as part of your brand?
There's going to be all sorts of things. I mean, look for the T-shirts, the hats. It's going to be a whole branding thing. You'll see me down in the Dunkin' Donuts. We're going to do a partnership, possibly.
Well, we've been speaking with Jen O'Connor. She is the founder of Jen O'Connor Consulting. You can just shoot me an email or give me a text, and I'll connect you with her if you're interested. Jen, thank you so much for making the time, lending your insights, and good luck on the new venture. I hope it's successful.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let me phrase that. So with that backdrop, what challenges are there going to be in 2026 for the agenda of children and families that you probably didn't, let me rephrase that. Here we go. I'm going to get there.